A reading from the letter to the Hebrews. Brothers and sisters, what more shall I say? I have no time to tell of Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, of David and Samuel and the prophets, who by faith conquered kingdoms, did what was righteous, obtained the promises. They closed the mouths of lions, put out raging fires, escaped the devouring sword. Out of weakness they were made powerful, became strong in battle, and turned back foreign invaders. Women received back their dead through resurrection. Some were tortured and would not accept deliverance in order to obtain a better resurrection. Others endure mockery, scourging, even chains and imprisonment. They were stoned, sawn in two, put to death at sore's point. They went about in schemes of sheep or goats, needy, afflicted, tormented. The world was not worthy of them. They wandered about in deserts and on mountains, in caves and in the crevices in the earth. Yet all these, though approved because of their faith, did not receive what had been promised. God had foreseen something better for us, so that without us they should not be made perfect. The word of the Lord. Responsorial Psalm. Let your hearts take comfort, all who hope in the Lord.
Let your hearts take comfort, all who hope in the Lord.
How great is the goodness, O Lord, which you have in store for those who fear you, and which toward those who take refuge in you, you show in the sight of the children of men. Let your hearts take comfort, all who hope in the Lord. You hide them in the shelter of your presence. From the plotting of men, you screen them with your abode. From the strife of tongues, let your hearts take comfort, all who hope in the Lord. Blessed be the Lord, whose wondrous mercy he hath shown me in a fortified city. Let your hearts take comfort, all who hope in the Lord. Once I said in my anguish, I am cut off from your sight. Yet you heard the sound of my pleading when I cried out to you.
Let your hearts take comfort, all who hope in the Lord.
Love the Lord, all you his faithful ones. The Lord keeps those who are constant, but more than requites those who act proudly.
Let your hearts take comfort, all who hope in the Lord.
Alleluia, alleluia.
Alleluia, alleluia.
A great prophet has arisen in our midst, and God has visited his people. Alleluia, alleluia.
The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark.
Glory to you, Lord.
Jesus and his disciples came to the other side of the sea, to the territory of Gennesarenes. When he got out of the boat, at once a man from the tombs who had an unclean spirit met him. The man had been dwelling among the tombs, and no one could restrain him any longer, even with a chain. In fact, he had frequently been bound with shackles and chains, but the chains had been pulled apart by him, and the shackles smashed, and no one was strong enough to subdue him. Night and day among the tombs and on the hillsides, He was crying out and bruising himself with stones. Catching sight of Jesus from a distance, he ran up and prostrated himself before him, crying out in a loud voice, "What have you done with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I adjure you by God, do not torment me." He had been saying to him, "Unclean spirit, come out of man." He replied, "Legion is my name. There are many of us." And he pleaded earnestly with him not to drive them away from that territory. Now a large herd of swine was feeding there on the hillside, and they pleaded with him, "Send us into the swine, let us enter them." And he let them, and unclean spirits came out and entered the swine. The herd of about 2,000 rushed down a steep hill into the bank, where they were drowned. The swineherds ran away and reported the incident in the town and throughout the countryside. And people came out to see what had happened. As they approached Jesus, they caught sight of the man who had been possessed by legion, sitting there, clothed and in his right mind, and they were seized with fear. Those who witnessed the incident explained to them what had happened to the possessed man and to the swine. Then they began to beg him to leave their district. As he was getting into the boat, the man who had been possessed pleaded to remain with him. But Jesus would not permit him, but told him instead, "Go home to your family and announce to them all that the Lord in his pity has done for you." Then the man went off and began to proclaim in the Decapolis what Jesus had done for him, and all were amazed. The Gospel of the Lord.
Good morning. Today's Gospel, at least for me, was a little bit scary, but not for the reasons you might think. It was a little scary because it always takes me back to my days in the seminary. Because in the seminary I went to, on one side of our chapel were the stained glass windows for the steps to priesthood, including all of the, what then were called the minor orders. And one of the minor orders that we received was that of exorcist. And the vision for the exorcist was this gospel, with the pigs falling over the hill into the water. And so I got to see this every day for 6 years. So I'm pretty familiar with this gospel. But what hit me this year with it, when you put it with yesterday's gospel, there's a certain sadness to it. Think of yesterday, how the gospel ended with the people of Nazareth trying to kill Jesus by throwing him off the cliff on which their town was built. And Luke said simply, Jesus passed through their midst and walked away. What a sad picture. Jesus walking away from those he loved because he could not force himself upon them. And something similar happens today. Here you have this mad person who was physically strong, tremendously disturbed, who is now set free. And when the townspeople come, they see he's clothed and in his right mind. They're filled with fear and beg Jesus to leave. And he gets into the boat. He cannot force himself upon them. Both of those images are extremely sad. But then they made me think of the great St. Augustine, and I've shared this before. He writes so poignantly about his conversion, and he says, "The nearer I was to become something different, the greater terror did it strike into me. For still, I hesitated to die to death and live to life, because the ingrown worst had more power over me than the untried better." And I think his experience probably has been replicated in all of us at different points. There are those times and moments when we hesitate before the healing, restoring power of Jesus. No, I don't ever remember asking Jesus to leave. I don't ever remember asking him to leave. But I can assure you, many times I have not asked for the more he longs to give. The more he longs to give. And I encourage you to think about the more that Jesus wants to do in your life as Jesus wants to do in mine.